high school reunion may be the first time many of us realize we've crossed a threshold into middle adulthood. It's a time we realize we're not quite old, but we're no longer really young. Ideally, middle adulthood is a time when all the years of building a career and a family begin to pay off. It's also a time to take stock, to see how our lives have measured up to our earlier goals and expectations. A time to consider, where do we go from here?
I'm anxious to get outside of football. I'm anxious to put it behind me. I'm anxious to no longer be known as a football player.
Had the chemotherapy.
Middle adulthood can also be a time of doubt and anguish, when the unexpected can shatter a cherished dream.
It was the most important experience of my life. It's not one I'd want to go through again. It's not one I'd ever say was worth it. But we survived it because that's what she wanted us to do.
And we find that despite setbacks, there's still hope, and that may lead us to surprising revelations about ourselves.
I was forced to be liberated. I didn't choose it. And in doing it, I found something about myself that I'm very glad I found.
This is a program about growth and change in the middle years of life. With the help of experts in human development, we'll explore some of the challenges that face us in this season. We'll meet people who will share their stories, and we'll discover that their stories are part of our story, part of the seasons of life. Around the age of 40, we get a message from the biological clock. It may come as gray hair or a few wrinkles, maybe can't read the small print anymore, but the message is clear. Our bodies just aren't what they used to be. There are perhaps fewer days ahead in our lives, more days behind. We're entering the season of middle adulthood. Now, that doesn't mean we're headed for a midlife crisis or about to go downhill. It does mean we face some new challenges, maybe change the story of our lives before it's too late, perhaps express parts of ourselves we may have hidden, begin a legacy for our children and their children. Not a money legacy necessarily, but a legacy that says, I was here, I mattered. For some of us, the message from the biological clock comes before we reach 40. That's often the case with athletes like Brian Sipe, a former Cleveland Browns quarterback. At 37, Brian's already at the threshold of middle age.
I began to ask myself, is this age? Is this what's happening? Because until then, up until that moment, I'd never realized that I was getting older. Professional football to me was more than a game on the field. It was a game off the field. Being a quarterback, I was expected to be something greater than myself. There was no question of whether I was a team leader. I either had to be a team leader or I wasn't on the team. If I wanted to be a goof-off, I wasn't given that opportunity. To me, in a way, there's an aspect of it that is really nothing more than prolonged adolescence. I think that that's not necessarily bad. I mean, we all wish that we were kids a little longer than we were. I'm anxious to get outside of football. I'm anxious to put it behind me. I'm anxious to no longer be known as a football player. I will always be proud of what I did, and I'll be happy when people recognize the accomplishments or whatever, but don't judge me by what I've done in the past. And now I want to be around other people and places where I can learn and laugh more. I've always learned and laughed from my kids. He's probably going to be asking me about all these things that we've been talking about here, and I hope I remember some of them so I can tell them because my dad didn't tell me enough about his. My father was an interesting man. He grew up on an Indian reservation. He always had a sense of space. What football allowed me to do is travel a lot of different places and be aware, I think keenly aware of space and people. I think nothing makes you more keenly aware of that than crowding into a place with 80,000 people and having to perform and being aware of noise and light and wind and everything else. For so long in professional football, I was constantly asked, what are you going to do when it's over? What are you going to do when it's over? And I used to manufacture answers for that because I thought that for these people's sake, they need to know that the quarterback of their football team has something else going. He's not just a dumb jock. In reality, I always wanted to walk out of football and have the curtain come down and say, okay, here's life. Here's life without football. Here's life without sports. It's been sports all my life, and here's a new life. And what a great opportunity. How many people have a chance to do that? I like a little uncertainty in my life right now. And I know there's a time. I know I don't like floating around. I know I don't like getting up in the morning and not being certain what I'm going to do with my time. I get back to the anxiety and the stress that I feel in my life that I think I inherited some from my father. I need some regimentation in my life. Football gave me regimentation, except for the Sunday mornings when I thought I was going to puke in my eggs because of stress. That football was a relatively calm time for me because I always knew what I was supposed to be doing and where I was supposed to be. Probably wouldn't have been a bad career serviceman. But boy, I feel like I'm armed with some great tools now. I got a good woman by my side, and I got 3 great kids, and there's nothing stopping me.
Most of us don't feel a sense of physically waning until much later, perhaps in our 50s or our 60s. I think an athlete, when they tell him or her, well, you can't play anymore, they have to deal with that issue much earlier, that somehow they are physically waning. They don't have the same capabilities. So they may have to face that so-called midlife crisis issue a bit earlier with themselves in terms of physical decline.
If the body tells us something at midlife, so does society. It has its own clock, the social clock, that tells us when in life we're supposed to do certain things, when to go to school, get a job, start a family, retire. But these days the social clock is changing. For instance, in 1950, perhaps 40 wasn't the age to go to school, but today it might be. The largest group in our society is the baby boomers, and they are listening closely to the social clock. They were born after World War II. 76 million of them are reaching the second half of their lives. They're changing our concept of middle age. Many of them are convinced that 40 is not too late to change the story of their lives. America's first official baby boomer was born a second after midnight on New Year's Day of 1946. She's Kathleen Wilkins of Philadelphia.
I'm not afraid of growing old. I think it's a state of mind. It's part of life, just like when we all grow old. I mean, that's just life. And it's how we cope with growing old. That's what's important.
Kathy's coping with the physical changes that often come with being 40.
Basically, eye changes. I have difficulty with small print now, which I think is part of the boomer era. I can't do much about that. I've noticed that it's a lot harder from 30 to 40 to drop 5 pounds.
Like millions of other baby boomers, Kathy Wilkins is making a fresh start by going back to school, in her case, to earn a master's degree. But like millions more, she's had an unhappy marriage.
In October of this year, I separated. It was a difficult decision for me because I felt very strongly about commitment. Certainly, no matter who makes a decision in a separated or divorced situation, you still come out feeling inadequate. Something went wrong, you failed. And I think a sadness comes over you, okay? One of the major things that I decided to do was to do something positive that I would enjoy.
At St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, Kathy and her daughters meet before their first class. Beth, who's 18, is also a student here.
When she chose this school, I said to her, would you rather me be in a graduate program elsewhere? Because I knew that this was her domain. And she said, oh, I'd rather like seeing you and meeting you for dinner one night a week over here. So I said, well, I'd enjoy that too.
When's your exams? Next week. No, next week. Mine's scheduled Monday night. Biggie. How about you? Are you all finished?
Yep.
Are you? Well, that's good. You don't get exams? No, seniors don't?
Senior privilege.
One of my reasons for going back to school, one of my primary reasons, was that I knew eventually my children would be leaving the nest, and that I wanted to have something in my hands that I really enjoyed and I really liked.
We're going to precept fruit cup and salad and...
Kathy's field is hotel restaurant management. She heads a staff of 18.
I feel that most probably at 40, as a boomer, I have more to offer than any 22-year-old going into a major corporation, because I can bring not only an expertise that I went back and studied for, I can bring life experience. If somebody told me 20 years ago I would be what I am today, I'd say, oh my goodness, but I'm glad I am who I am today. I don't necessarily think at 20 I liked myself, but at 40 I like myself.
So we see some transitional women here among those born in the 40s who really have one foot in one era and the other foot in another era. And I sometimes wonder if their high divorce rate might in part reflect the fact that they have been caught in the crossfires of history. They spent their childhood years with fairly traditional notions about what it meant to be a girl. And then came the 60s, where everything was turned on its head.
I think that there is general agreement by all of our citizens that a supreme national effort will be needed in the years ahead to move this country safely through the 1960s.
John F. Kennedy's words foreshadowed the anguish of Vietnam.
A new low in public protest. An American flag is burned at the height of the demonstration.
And the struggle of the civil rights movement.
We will be able to work together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together.
"25 years later, the 1963 class of Dormont High School holds a reunion.
Okay, smile. All right, thanks. Smile. Drop your head just a little bit. Smile. All right, thank you.
It's a perfect setting to examine the so-called midlife crisis, the time from 40 on when we're supposed to worry about everything from our identity to our love life.
You're married now, aren't you?
Not now. Between husbands.
People use that phrase, midlife crisis, like it's one of the certainties of life, like death and taxes. Some researchers have even suggested that the period between 40 and 45 for men must be a time of transition, during which we re-examine our work, our family, and our relationships. But not all experts agree. Even so, the term midlife crisis has become part of our American vocabulary and image.
I think the whole notion of midlife crisis has been over-dramatized for the purpose of educating the public and probably also selling books.
I think it's real, and I think men have it, and I think women have it. And I think it's learning to change and adjust to becoming a different person.
In my own practice, years ago, men did not come in talking about midlife crisis. Now they come in and they talk about midlife crisis and declining sexual powers and should I change my career, what is there left for me in life, that somehow they're making this period into a problem.
I've known many people who say, my God, I'm 40, what do I do now? Or 50 or whatever the age is. I never had that hang-up. A lot of other hang-ups, but not those.
You look in the mirror and suddenly you're seeing somebody who isn't what you quite expected to find there. Or you look in the album of photographs and then you look in the mirror and then you see that something's happened. And that, right down, deep down in that very basic core of experienced self. So we see important changes at all these levels. Whether or not they lead to crisis, whether or not these transitions mound up to the point of crisis depends very much on the individual.
So, not everybody's destined to have a crisis at midlife. And that's because everybody's psychological clock, everybody's personal timetable to develop is different. In fact, the middle years can be a time of going uphill, not down, time of increasing power, social power, personal power. Some people even become part of what's been called the command generation. Wheelock College in Boston celebrates its centennial.
How do you like it? Isn't it nice?
Daniel Cheever is 45. He's been president of Wheelock for 5 years.
Hi, Olive. Will you cut our ribbon?
Today joins alumni and friends of Wheelock to open a new building on campus.
1, 2, 3.
All right.
Going from public education, having been a school superintendent for 10 years, to a president of a college was unusual. But it came at a time in my life when I was really ready to do something quite different. I was 40. I had talked with friends who were in other fields about possibly switching careers and realized that I had a lot of investment in what I was doing and a lot of experience, and I wasn't just going to walk into a corporate boardroom and be CEO of a major company. I had paid my dues in one field, and that's where I'd reap my reward.
The one thing which makes life worth living is to serve a cause. And the greatest cause that can be served is childhood education. 13 million American children live in poverty, here in America, which is still the wealthiest country in the world. 13 million children. I think that's where we at Wheelock come in. Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice show. Nice show. Really was.
What influenced me looking back more than anything, my father, which I didn't realize at the time. He was and is a teacher, and he also is someone who all his life has been a teaching person, which most of the times is wonderful, but not always.
We don't need the jib to get underway, Dan. No, but we don't need it with this boat. It'll be quiet unless you want it.
Almost every summer weekend, Dan Cheever sails with his family on Cape Cod Bay. Other members of the crew, Dan's wife Abby, 43, their son Charles, he's 19. The boat's been sailed by the family for decades.
So, you see, it's brass and all polished.
Daniel Cheever Sr., who's 70, teaches the art of sailing to his granddaughter Abigail, 17.
My great-grandfather built a house here first. We would race once or twice a year in a special race for old-time boats. And I was ballast, and I spent my time hanging over the rail, being drenched by Buzzards Bay waves, chop. But it was a great experience, the 3 generations sailing a boat.
With his son Charles, Dan does his best to stay in shape. He quotes a leading expert on physical fitness.
As Mae West said, I have everything I ever had, only it's 6 inches lower. My weight has sort of gravitated to my waist, and I'm a little heavier than I wish I were, and constantly trying to lose weight.
How did it look?
I'm aware of not being as strong as I was, of having less stamina, even though I do run and exercise moderately. I'm not a fanatic or able to do it as much as I'd like. And I don't like the fact that my body is starting to, if not wear down, at least is not the one that I've felt has been with me all my life. I sometimes feel as though I'm occupying somebody else's body, or apprehensive about changes that will happen in the future. I think my crisis, and it wasn't a crisis, but my change came at the age of 40 when I decided to stop working as a school superintendent after 10 years and go to higher education. So I think that's the point when I had the biggest changes in my life, when our son sort of went off to high school and his adolescence really began. And also when Abby, as a lawyer at that point, had practiced law for probably 3 or 4 years, and so she was really entering the phase where her own career was taking shape.
I don't like that.
You did it? So our relationship needed to adjust as well.
Probably the hardest thing was for Dan. He all of a sudden was in a position where he wasn't coming home to a wife with a meal on the table. In fact, he was coming home to take a babysitter home and to put a meal on the table for me, because I got home considerably later. So that's probably where, he had probably the hardest adjustment to make.
Well, we've worked through all of that, and I'd say for the last year or so we've had been in a phase. She's now practiced law for about 7 or 8 years, and this change in roles is a decade old, and it's acquired a comfort and a mutual respect that is really quite nice, and which I hadn't expected. So that has been a big turning point. And then the last one is saying goodbye to our kids, which is a dramatic way of saying that they're going off to college.
Will you be with people here for the whole next week?
No, I don't think so.
They're going. I mean, my children, they're going to be gone. I'm not very old. I mean, I'm only 43 years old, and my last child is about to leave. I mean, that's horrible.
I think that a lot of adults have a hard time relating to kids in high school.
They become more your friends and less your children, in the sense of small children. Certainly become more independent, which is both wonderful and sometimes scary for us. And I think leaves you also with the mixed feelings of the freedom you'll have being just a husband and wife again, but at the same time the terror of wondering whether
we should swim over here.
You will still have the same kinds of interests and common concerns and activities that you did before your children were born. That's where we are now.
Where am I now? That's a question many people ask at midlife. When you look at the empty nest, when you count the days ahead, it may lead you to think about something to pass on to the next generation, about something that will live beyond you, a legacy, not necessarily money, but some imprint upon the future, a heritage. Jim Kennedy, at age 45, operates the largest dairy farm in Butler County, Pennsylvania. The legacy he is shaping for his 5 children includes not only the farm, but his values.
My day starts groggy as heck at 5:30 in the morning. This is what time I usually get to the barn, about 5:30. I walk into the barn and say good morning to the girls that are there ahead of me and wondering why I'm so late.
Fancy, get up here right now. Come on.
Jim's wife, Rita, is 45, their son, Jason, 11, another son, Jeffrey, 23, and his wife, Janice, also 23.
It's great to have Jeffrey working with us and hoping that someday that Jeff and Janice and the other 4 children will be able to take over and say, Rita and Jim, goodbye.
The Kennedy family's always had a deep sense of responsibility. The farm was sold to Jim by his father, who told him at the time,
"If you fail altogether on your own. You don't fail with me." And basically, I believe that was the best thing in my mind to do, because if I knew if I failed, it was my own fault. It wasn't my dad's fault. It wasn't my wife's fault. It was based on my own opinions. But I've got some problems here with the cow that's...
But sometimes success or failure is determined by other forces.
I'm losing her, you know. I mean, she's just not coming with me quick enough.
Jim's prize Holstein becomes desperately ill while calving. The veterinarian's been called in to try to save her. They're worried there might be tears in her uterus.
That made the difference this morning because I could not get it, okay? And I had to push that calf clean back in and clean down into the bottom.
Finally, after hours of emergency treatment, both the Holstein and her calf will survive. For Jim Kennedy, it's been another extraordinary, ordinary day.
I don't think there's anything routine in my day. Every day is different, and I deal with so many different situations day in and day out. I don't think I've had 2 days the same. And I've been in this business for a day and a half, so.
We often joke about it now, but we can remember the day we had to scrape 24 cents together to buy a loaf of bread. And I think it makes you closer when you have to struggle and you're both working toward the same idea. And I think it did make us closer. It's not like somebody just handed us everything. We've really had to work for what we have now.
You have to help me cut the cake. You're just going to cut a little piece because you're going to feed.
What?
Why? Oh, is this the way? Open your mouth. I won't do that to you.
Real wide.
In 25 years of marriage, Jim and Rita Kennedy have put together a farm large enough to permit each of their children to stay in farming if they want to. This farm may be Jim's material legacy to his children, but it goes beyond that. For Jim Kennedy, this land is the key to preserving a way of life.
Whenever I was a kid, I was born and raised on the other side of that hill there, down in that valley. And that's where I was born. I was born in a house there. And we always, as kids, we always wanted to come to this place because it was so big. There was 800 acres on it. No one bothered it. And to walk on it and see what's happening here, see all the wildlife, hunt for arrowheads, you tell me. It's great, you know. It's another place to go and be away from everybody. There's no houses on it other than my own. I don't know how long we'll keep it that way, but I hope for a long time.
Jim Kennedy's way of life will extend to his children's children. Justin is 5 days old. He's with his great-grandfather, Francis.
Open up, blow your house in. What's that story about the 3 bears or what?
That one's the 3 little pigs.
The 3 little pigs.
I ain't doing a hole in there because I'm all wet. I've been out in the barn working on it.
Come on here.
No.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, I ain't wet.
There, Grandma got him back.
I'm sure that I will do things, you know, for my grandchildren that I did not do, and I didn't have the time to do with my own children. I'm sure every grandparent treats their grandchildren differently because they have the time, because they're no longer struggling within the family to make it go. Did you get your hair combed? I guess that's where I've been, and that's where I'm at. From here, everything else will go on, and we hope it'll go on as a family operation. Time will only tell us.
We can't always control what happens with the passage of time. Things come out of the blue. shatter dreams, destroy legacies. That happened to Matt Nort. He's 52, married with 2 children in school. Matt spent most of his life working in the Pittsburgh steel mills. And when most of them shut down, like this one did, he lost his job. Now he has to struggle to support his family with a whole series of low-paying jobs.
The dream is gone. It's probably gone forever. And it seems like it tears you apart. It's just disintegrating away. You look alongside the riverbanks where things are. There's all flat ground. There used to be at one time a big scrap pile there where steel used to be melted and used over again, processed. That's all leveled off. And even right till today, I still think of the mill.
If only they had done what I asked them to do, we wouldn't have these deficits.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I get depressed at the times. You wake up, you feel broken down, you feel weak, and then sometimes you get a little irritable with the kids, you know, at times. It's just a whole change in their atmosphere, too, the same as me, because they used to see me always getting up, going to work.
Move over, buddy.
Thank you, Al. With an eye,
See?
22. Oh, easy.
You got it?
Nice.
I got that. And
I used to have that one. So I gave you my
what
card.
happens if I hit off of this one? What if I
If
win?
you get them all, you will get the money.
Well, who gets it?
You!
Oh, okay.
We could get a job and good paying at that time, but now you can't. If you don't go to college or you don't get the high school diploma, like Daddy doesn't have a high school diploma, and he can't go anywhere.
And you have to have something to back you up too. If that what
Some
you want to
training.
be somehow doesn't work out, you have to have something else that you can
And
do.
for me, it's too hard to start right out. Like I said, I'm at the age now, 10 more years, I should be hopping to the pasture. I should be sitting, which now, in my mellow years, I should be relaxing and have everything, but it didn't work that way. So,
But it's like I told you before, we made it this far and we'll make it the rest of the way. It's you and I against the world.
I remember the day my dad died. That was a little tragic to me. Coming home from work, when I worked at Clark's, I seen him taking him out there. I always thought the day would come, as I was only about 18, 19 years old. I always wanted to drink the first beer with my dad there. And we lived across the street from this place. It's a friendly tavern, it's been down there. And my dad used to go over, he used to be always stand on the corner and that. And I always thought, well, maybe I could pal around with him, but this dream never came true. Which dreams now, this one hasn't come true either. I always thought in America, you had the dream that you could have a house, car, stuff and that there. Not extravagant. Something where you could live to your older age and that there and enjoy life. But now...
But Matt Nort is not enjoying life. He says he was happy when he was a steel worker. He loved hard work. He loved breaking a sweat near the mill's coke oven. Now all he can do is pick up part-time work whenever it's available.
I figured I started out, and I'm back where I started years back. And I have a lot of more different bills and different stuff, and I'm a lot older, where it's hard for me to cope with this because of my age and that. I just hope for the best. That's about everything I can only have is the hope. Many times I was thinking if God would take me in my sleep, but then I figured, hey, I still want to see these kids. And I want to see them, you know, to get to a regular age where they can take care of themselves. And I just thought to myself, well, I'm going to have to bear with it, you know. And I say a few prayers and things happen. Sometimes just to have somebody just give me the chance. That's all I want, the chance. And that's about the only thing where they said the American dream went away now. The only thing is if they could give us a chance.
He's a man who has built strong expectations in almost a linear way about what's going to happen. You work hard, you build security, then you rest on your laurels and you enjoy the fruits of your labor. And suddenly one day, all of that is gone. And it could happen at any age, but it's probably very devastating at midlife because it's very hard to rebuild, especially for a man.
I think one of the things that we have to do for people during this period is to have the kind of supports available from their family and from the community to help them through these difficult times so that they can recoup and not deteriorate because of the losses, but regain their strength and reattach themselves to life and to the community and to people.
Some people in their 50s seem to bounce back better than others. Some can even turn losses into gains, find strengths they never knew they had. There's been a lot of tragedy in Chris Rosenberg's life. In her 20s, she was struck by polio. Then her brother was killed in Vietnam. Later, her stepson died, and her marriage fell apart. But remarkably, Chris didn't give up.
Bye. That's a good class. I don't know if our speaker's here yet. Did you know who she is now? Dr.
At 55, she is the director of student development at La Roche College, involved with the needs of middle-aged women.
I think when I relate to certain women, especially women of mature age who were thinking about going back to school or who were having to do something to change their lives, that the reason we interact so closely, so quickly, and in such a positive way is because I can be real to them.
Do I look better today? Oh, you look so much better.
In counseling sessions, Chris helps women cope with the problems of entering the job market for the first time.
That's why when graduation is looming, it's hard for me to conceive of actually graduating. It's been such a long struggle.
What did you used to interview for?
I really haven't done very much, Chris, except raise children for 30 years.
I can say I felt things like that. Let me tell you when I was so scared, or let me tell you when I was so grieved. Those are the kinds of things that I had been alone, that I had been frightened to be alone, that I had been a woman who didn't have any way to earn any money, that I went to school and didn't make it once. Those things are very important. It's as though my failures are more important than my successes, except that the women would then see me looking okay.
I would have given up if it hadn't been for you. I really would have. I just can't thank you enough, Chris.
You have. My husband, Harry, and I were separated for 4.5 years. That's quite a long time. But we remained friends even when he was gone. Now, I don't mean by that things were peaceful, because I was furious and upset, and most of our contacts were not very happy ones, but we did see each other. I was forced to be liberated. I didn't choose it. And in doing it, I found something about myself that I'm very glad I found. You lose a certain security and innocence forever, but something else happens that's very great, I think.
Oh, there we go.
Now, 3 years after their separation, Chris and Harry Rosenberg are giving their marriage another try.
We certainly don't have what it would be called a typical relationship. We have separate bank accounts, separate telephones, separate rooms, practically a suite, actually. We're in a big house now that no one else lives in.
Well, it feels good anyway. I feel very peaceful and positive. I feel better than I have in years and years. Not physically, but emotionally and mentally. I'm having fun now.
Isn't it too bad to get to the age we are now and think for the first time you've got a little bit of your act together?
Well, boy, it's better late than never. I mean, that's trite saying, but most people never do, or a lot of people never do, maybe.
I feel like an individual, a person,
That's right.
not a married woman necessarily. And for my type of personality and for what's just happened to me, that's the very best. And I know that it also is for him.
I love you.
That's funny for you to be able to say that so easily, because I used to say it so easily and now I don't say it that easily. I don't know what my life's going to be in a year or 2 years. Harry and I didn't make each other any vows or promises when he moved back in that we would be living together for the rest of our lives. We have a kind of an open thing here. I don't mean open marriage type of thing. I mean an open relationship where you don't know what's going to be from then on, and you play the days as they come. And I'm comfortable with that, and I think he's comfortable with that too.
One of the rules of successful adult development is the capacity to be able to decide whether to give oneself away or not. In their 20s, men are better at not giving themselves away, and women are better at giving themselves away. Men err in the direction of being isolated and lonely. Women err in the direction of becoming selfless to their own detriment. In middle life, as we saw in the case of Chris Rosenberg, the balance shifts.
So she's in effect turned her losses, her depletions, even her early crippling through polio, into the foundations of what I call an active mastery style. She's no longer passively suffering, no longer passively submitting to these insults, but is now using them in an active guise to heal not only herself but others. And again, you see the emergence of the woman in midlife.
Researchers are learning more and more about the biological clock and menopause. While 10 to 15% of women experience serious physical problems at this time, the vast majority of women say that menopause is almost a non-event for them. More significant, there's a psychological change that is shared by men and women in cultures all over the world, and that is, once parenting is over, each sex becomes more like the other. Men express a softer, more nurturing side. Women stand up and assert themselves. Just look at Harriet Lyons. She lives in Roxbury, Massachusetts. At 59, she is the proud matriarch of an extended family. When she lost her job several years ago, she was evicted from her home, but she didn't quit.
Midlife should be a good time. Part of my misery about my midlife was that I could look around and see that I not only couldn't do anything for my children, I couldn't do anything for myself. I wasn't the grandma or the mother-in-law that could give anything, because I had nothing. I had lost everything. By not having a job, I had lost my furniture that was in storage, my pots and pans that were 40 years old. Loved them dearly. Great old iron skillets. Kids' albums, little mementos. Curls I cut from my oldest son's head. Some of my daughter's ribbons that they had won in school. I had literally lost everything. And I came to Boston, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was visiting my daughter-in-law. And we were reading the paper, and she said, "We're going to have to do something about you." I said, "Yeah, what?" She said, "Well, for starters, you're going to answer this ad, 55 and over. Come see us, we have jobs," and the ad looked nice. She dialed the number, handed me the phone, and said, "Speak." And in 2 weeks, I had a job. Sometimes at the Bank of Boston, I feel as though I've got one foot on a banana peel and the other foot out the door. You know, the pressures get high in the department I work in. I say, So what? I came here 2 years ago, I can go somewhere else. I've got a lot of ideas flowing around in my head of what I want to do when I retire. About 10 years. I retire from the Bank of Boston. For the most part, I enjoy my experience there, too. It's really neat. It's neat to have supervisors who are 25 years old and they know their business and you work as a part of the team. The best thing of all is the fear is gone. Just wiped away. My little granddaughter had come into my life because with all of the good things I've said, like everybody else, we all have something in our hearts. My oldest daughter has been drug addicted off and on for a number of years. Beautiful girl, so much talent, but I wish she would just know it. But anyway, Jamila is her daughter. That used to be a big high school where all the smart girls went.
Don't show up.
Put them in the bag. Put them in the bag. She tends not to forget them along with her snack, okay?
We will have them.
One, two, three, cheese!
The steak was marinated in Lambrusco. Are you sure you won't want to taste that? I got to get the plates out.
Where are the plates?
No, this one. Look, because he married you, darling.
That's Grandma.
Yes, Grandma. Now we have to turn the
Here's
page.
my father.
1, 2, 3, and 4 generations. Very lucky people, aren't we?
Who's that baby?
You.
I have some goals I want to keep. I might even want to go back in business again. Have got to get a little car so Jamila and I can tootle around town on our weekends. But I feel as though I have something to offer. I know I do. My grandchildren now call me up and ask me questions, and my opinion means something to them. My children and I are beginning to talk. I guess in a lot of ways I'm coming to where I wanted to be in the first place. I always wanted to be friends with the kids, because I still think there's some pretty neat people. I feel good about myself. Got a lot of things I need to polish up on, a lot of edges that need to be kind of fine-tuned down. Still got a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up. Some debts I owe that I will pay back. And not just financial debts. There's some emotional debts I owe. But I know I can do it, and that's what I'm going to do. And I can do it. That's the best part about it all. I know I can do it.
The new powers that emerge in some people in their 50s often lead to what Erik Erikson, the psychoanalyst, calls generativity. We're generative, he said, when we see to the well-being of our immediate family and to the well-being of the larger human family. For Ruth and Dave Rylander, this generativity was inspired by their daughter, Lynn.
I wonder who's kissing her now.
Every Tuesday night in a church basement, a group of middle-aged men meet to sing barbershop and choral music. Among them, Dave Rylander. He's 57.
Kissing her now.
It's Sunday. Dave's wife, Ruth, they've both responded in unique ways to a tragedy in their lives.
They used to say life begins at 40. That sort of became a stereotype joke, and then we got to talking about midlife crises. And I guess I'm supposed to be in midlife. I guess I was supposed to be in midlife 10 years ago. And whether I would have gone through a crisis had not a crisis of unprecedented proportions presented itself is something I'll never know. Oh. Oh, and there's Lynn.
There's Lynn.
Tiny baby. She looked so much like your mother. I can remember the minute she was born, the nurse held her up and I said, "Oh my goodness, she looks like my mother-in-law." And they said, "Oh, is that all right?"
There
I am, hanging diapers.
This
It
is
was
the
a
days, the days before the
Before
disposables.
Pampers, it was a different era.
There's the old '56 Chevy.
Oh,
That
yes,
was
our
a-
first car. Whoops. Oh,
Okay,
there she
okay,
is.
there's Lynn.
Look. The day that Dave was in the hospital visiting Lynn, and the doctor took him aside and told him she had leukemia, was, I guess, the worst day of our lives. It was unbearable to watch her suffer. My wedding ring's bent. It's bent from the pressure of her hand squeezing mine, trying to endure the pain that she experienced. And I think I'll always let it stay that way.
I put Lynn's graduation in here, the one that I liked.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere, if I can find it. And there are some others.
There
Oh,
it
here
is.
they are.
There it is. Oh, I like that. I like that. At this point, you see, Lynn had just been out of the hospital not too long, and she's wearing a wig,
Wearing the wig
right there because she had the chemotherapy and had no hair. Never knew at that point that she would live long enough to graduate from high school and then go on to college. It was a lifetime lived in such a short period of time. It's always going to be hard. It's always going to be hard. The heroism with which my daughter lived her life and her need to leave some sort of mark, to be important somehow, is the stimulus for my doing the work I do.
I want you to be thinking about ways in which you, in your daily lives, can reach out and help the person next to you, the person you don't even know.
Since Lynn died, Ruth has committed herself to the worldwide peace mission of the Presbyterian Church.
It isn't easy. And yet, I think we all know that we're not alone.
When Lynn died, Dave Rylander also changed his priorities. He became more generative. After 34 years as a commercial banker, he became director of a community food bank that provides food for the unemployed and disenfranchised.
I think she'd like what I'm doing today with the food bank. She was that kind of a young woman that cared about people.
It's awful hard to say that she had to die so that I could learn how to live. But maybe that's true. It seems to me that the midpoint of our lives is a time of enormous opportunity. We've learned a lot about what life really is. We've had experiences that have enriched us. We have seen some of the tragedies and some of the joys. We've done our apprenticeship, so to speak. And at least for me, I know who I am. I think in some ways we're more cautious, and yet in many ways I'm less cautious than I was. Because what do I have to be afraid of?
This has been a program about the time that's left in life, about using it well, about legacies. We learn that every life, however long, however brief, leaves some kind of legacy. And that legacy can be more than something material. It can be a life itself, what that life stands for, what it's been, what it means. Lynn Rylander's life may have ended, but she was here. She mattered.